Welcome back to another episode of the GCN Tech Clinic, where I try and help and solve your bike-related problems with years worth of knowledge that I've somehow managed to keep inside of my brain. Right, with no further ado then, let's crack on. Actually, no, first up, if you've got a bike-related problem, leave it for me down there in the comment section. Right, first question this week comes in from Mark Hand. Hi John, long-time lurker, first-time poster. I'm wondering where this is going. I'm an enthusiastic home mechanic and have replaced and maintained most components of my bike at this stage. I've got a pretty much end-to-end 105 group set apart from the cassette which came with the bike and was a Tiagra one. I've replaced it with an Ultegra model with the same range of gearing. I've set the high and low limit screws and dialed in the indexing. However, I can either get the low end or the high end of the cassette index. When moving to the other end, I get that annoying chugging. I reckon he means something like that noise, and some occasional jumping. Any ideas, please? Right, a few things here. First up, probably you're using an old chain with a brand new cassette. Not ideal, so I'd have a look at that. Also, maybe, just maybe, your rear derailleur hangers become slightly out of alignment, and that's enough just to make a knock-on effect as you go up and down the cassette. So it's all right for the first few changes, and then it just becomes gradually worse, and then you fiddle around and start at the other end, and then, yeah, it just gets worse going back the other way. Either way, check out those two things. Failing that, maybe, just maybe, it could well be your gear cables. So a fresh set of gear cables, it's amazing what that can do. It can rejuvenate the worst gear shifting into some of the best. So check out those three things and let me know how you get on. Next up is Ahmed, and Ahmed comes from Malaysia and says, what's the best upgrade to my road bike after I upgraded to clipless pedals? Which one is best out of a wheel set, handlebar or heart rate monitor by Garmin? Right, Ahmed, out of those, wheels, undoubtedly. They make the biggest change to feel and performance on a bike, in my opinion. Pair them up with some good tyres as well, and you're going to be laughing. You're going to be dropping all your mates going up those climbs. And also, it's probably a great way to save some weight off of a bike too, and one of the best sort of cost per gram, if you like, because it's amazing just how many grams you can shed with a decent pair of wheels. Right, now we've got Giddy, who says, my bike shop tried to true my wheels and managed to crack the alloy nipples in the process, which they blamed for being corroded. How do I fix these cracked nipples? Oh dear, oh dear. Right, this isn't that unusual with alloy spoke nipples. The reason being they are under quite a lot of tension there, and they're pretty soft too, and they do just tend to corrode over many years. I've built up wheels in the past with alloy nipples, and when I've come to try and true them up after a couple of seasons, I've had that dreaded rounding off feel as I try to loosen them or tighten them. The best thing to do there, unless you are building up a super light bike and well, you've got money to burn, put some brass nipples on there. Yeah, they are going to weigh more, they're not possibly going to look as cool, but you are going to get the gyroscopic effect, if you like, when you're riding along. So once the wheels are up to speed, it's going to have like a flywheel effect, right? So you're going to keep on going, and importantly, they're not going to let you down. Those brass nipples, I've got them on a pair of old training wheels, and they are going strong after many, many years. Right, now we've got Spectrum. I do wonder where you all get your usernames from. Either way, Spectrum, nice name. ZX, surname? I don't know, or first name even. I recently picked up a new zip alloy stem, and it's been making a clicking noise when I'm riding out the saddle. It's currently attached to an alloy steerer tube and alloy bars, if that helps. I've done some testing, and it's the only stem I've used that has this issue. What could be causing this? Right, Spectrum, firstly, make sure that you grease up those bolts, all of the bolts on the stem, and they're torqued up to the correct amount. You could also try putting on some anti-seize or copper paste, both around the steerer tube where it meets onto the stem, and also the stem where it matches onto the bars there too. That's probably going to help. Alternatively, what you could also look at is the top cap, so where it goes on top of the actual stem. Make sure that that's sitting nice and flush too. Maybe grease the underside of that, bit of copper paste too. It stops any noises. And then also your headset top cap cover. So quite often they're carbon or alloy. It just covers up that upper bearing in the upper part of the head tube. And quite often they can just rub too. And also your headset spacers. Make sure there's nothing in there which is causing a little tick or click noise. I don't like ticking or clicking. Just want to get that perfectly clear. Right, next up is Robaid, who says, I recently had a problem with my alloy seat post seizing in a carbon frame. I've had it removed at the expense of the seat post, but want to avoid it happening again. What product should I use to prep a new seat post to prevent it seizing in the future? Right then, semi-can of worms on this one. Personally, my own prevention for this kind of thing is to put some anti-seize or copper paste, again, second time that being mentioned today, inside of the seat tube. The reason being, when you're bonding two components together, or not bonding but placing them, they can actually create a galvanic corrosion or a bond, which I've already mentioned, because of an electrochemical process which is happening. Because tiny little electrical charges are actually held or can be conducted through the materials, and then when an electrolyte becomes present, not the sort of thing you drink from a bottle, but it kind of is, they actually create that permanent bond, or semi-permanent, that often becomes really tight to break. There are certain materials which they don't do that, but more often than not they do. Carbon does in fact create or conduct electricity, as does the alloy, and that's what's causing that problem. So use some copper paste and it should prevent it, because it's thick enough and it doesn't aid that conduction of the electrochemical process. Right, next one is Harry McGuinness, who's obviously a commuter, because he said, commuters in the comments, ask GCN Tech viewers, hashtag cheeky. Right, what do you use as a bag? I'm currently using a backpack, but looking at an oversized saddlebag with a seat post rack to keep it stable. Anyone got any recommendations? Lovely question, this one, and I'm going to answer it even though I'm not a viewer. Well, I am a viewer because I watch all the videos. Right, okay, I use a rack on my own bike for going to and from work from a company called Tailfin. It attaches onto the bike via the skewer or the through axle of the rear wheel, because it's extended and it's got little clips, or kind of a cutouts rather, that the rack itself, which is made from carbon fibre, can slip onto, and then it attaches to the seat post, and you can put a big pannier bag or even two on there. The great thing about this is I can put everything in there I need for a week, including a laptop and even my sandwiches. The reason I don't like saddlebags, like the ones that come out quite long, is quite often they move around a lot. They don't look that good, and importantly, I can't fit my laptop in there myself. But if you can fit everything you need and it's not going to move around too much, maybe that is something for you. But personally, that's what I use for my own ride. Right, the final three questions are all inner tube related, a little bit of rubber to finish us off. But the third from last is from Andrew Brown, who says, when changing an inner tube, is there any reason to use a powder like talcum powder to help with insulation, or is it not necessary? Thanks. Right, it's not 100% necessary. I tend to use it though, because it helps inner tubes and tyres work a bit better together and help slip onto, well, quite tough rims sometimes that we encounter. And it's almost just a force of habit really to put it in there, but it isn't always necessary. But this is a little bit of trivia for you here. I like to chuck a bit of trivia in every now and then. Sometimes when you let the air out of your tyre, you get a bit of talcum powder come out, or that sort of stuff. The reason being, when some inner tubes are being manufactured, they're sort of loaded up, if you like, with just a fraction of talcum powder, a very, very small amount, so that when they're folded up or rolled up and compressed nice and tightly into those little boxes, that whenever we get them out, we can't put them back in quite as small. That basically the rubber doesn't stick to itself and in any way sort of becomes stuck together, if you like, because obviously the talcum powder is preventing that. So it means that when we pump them up, they just inflate nice and easily. There's no popping or anything like that. Right then, Paul Cannon, penultimate one. Hi John, I'm wondering, what is the purpose of the nut that comes on the stem of inner tubes? I always just throw them away. Right, Paul, they can actually help the valve stay in place when you're using a hand pump, because when we start to use a hand pump and we're getting stressed out with our little cyclist arms, we tend to wrestle around a bit with the valve, and in turn that can start bending the valve. And I have actually seen valves get bent in the past, and in the worst case, on an old inner tube for instance, the valve can actually rip out of the actual butyl of the rubber inner tube there too. So that's one use for them. The other one is to stop a valve rattling, and I guess that's probably it. I can't think of any other reason for having a valve stem nut on an inner tube. Anyone else though, let me know the reasons why you keep them on there. I keep them on there on a winter bike, but on a race bike I don't. Don't know why. And the final one comes in from Jeremy Kellogg. Hi John, I have a really simple question. Right, let's hope it is. Should inner tube be replaced when replacing worn out tyres? If the inner tubes had been in service for a while, do they lose any resiliency? Or are they essentially protected by the tyre? In which case, they should be reused. Jeremy, lovely question, and it's not that simple at all. I guess if an inner tube inside of a tyre was stored somewhere where the climatic conditions were either really, really hot or really, really cold, it could affect the actual longevity of the inner tube. But in essence, I'd be tempted to follow the following saying: if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Right, I hope that's been able to help solve that one, Jeremy, because it's a really difficult one, and I can't see why the inner tube itself would actually be perishing away if it's covered up by a tyre, but who knows, I'm not a rubber expert. Right, let me know though if you've got a question for me, leave it down there in the comments section. I'll do my very best to help answer it in a future up and coming episode. Remember to like and share this video with your friends too. Don't forget, check out the GCN shop, shop.globalcyclingnetwork.com, whole heap of goodies for you to check out. For 2 more cracking videos, of course, click just down here and just up here.